Good morning, everybody. It is Tuesday, April 19th, 2022. This is a regular meeting of the Commissioners of the City of Rehoboth Beach. We are live in City Hall Commissioners Room. I want to remind everybody this is rescheduled from our regular meeting that's normally on Friday. This year it was on Good Friday, and so this is why we're rescheduled to a Tuesday. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 9:01 a.m. Would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. With that, we'll start off with roll call. Commissioner Tony Sharp.
Here.
Commissioner Jay Legree.
Here.
Commissioner Ed Stranowski.
Here.
Commissioner Susan Gay. Commissioner Patrick Gossett. Commissioner Tim Bennett.
All alone down here.
and Mayor Stan Mills is here. Commissioners Gossett and Gay did let me know ahead of time that they would not be here, so it has nothing to do with you. Thank you very much. I also want to thank everybody that's watching virtually. Thank you for being here and watching it. I also like to thank everybody who's here in person. And we'll call on you at appropriate times during the meeting to ask for your input. With that, I want to remind everybody that support documents, those are documents that support individual agenda topics. When they are available prior to the meeting, they are embedded in the agenda. And if you haven't done so yet, please seek out the legislative portal. Go to cityofrehoboth.com. In the center of the homepage, center right side, you'll see a lime green box. It says Legislative Portal. And from there, seek out the agenda and the meeting type, and you'll be able to find support documents, the same support documents that we use up here to guide us in making our decisions. With that, I want to identify correspondence is received of late. From Mike Strange. He's also here in person. So I wanted to acknowledge his letter that is embedded in the agenda. We'll go to the next item, which is approval of minutes. There are no minutes yet to improve at this meeting. So from there, we'll go right to the city manager's report. Sharon?
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, everyone. We have 3 street aid expenditures for approval. 2 for Delmarva Power, 1 in the amount of $8,671.62 for streetlights, and 1 in the amount of $535.43 for streetlights.
I'd like a motion to approve the 2 expenditures as noted.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion to approve by Commissioner Sharp and a second by Commissioner Jay Legree to approve Delmarva Power bill dated March 31st in the amount of $8,671.62. And also the same motion to approve April expenditures to Delmarva Power and Apple Electric totaling $1,323.43. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor of approval of the paying the expenditures signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? No.
Mayor, we also have a 4/14/2022 payment for Apple Electric, to Apple Electric in the amount of $788, and that is also
We just did.
for streetlights. Okay, you did the total.
Well
Thank you.
done. How efficient.
Thank you. The Delaware Avenue restrooms are expected to be open by this coming weekend. Construction on the new addition will continue. The communications office is working to implement a new Rehoboth Beach beacon email text messaging system. We're hoping for an early May rollout for this endeavor. Residents can subscribe for alerts designed to let them know when something isn't as it should be. For example, when a summer concert is canceled due to weather conditions, or a water main repair is underway, or a road is partially closed for paving. The new Nixle messaging system provided through Everbridge and branded by the city as Rehoboth Beach Beacon was approved by commissioners in the current fiscal year 23 budget. The new alert system will be utilized in addition to other means by which the city communicates with residents. This will also replace the code red alert system the city's been using for the past 7 years. Through this service, subscribers will be informed when something is out of the norm or will impact their access or safety. It's a text and email-based system. It's not meant to encompass news that is not time-sensitive or critical. We anticipate users will receive approximately 3 to 4 texts or emails from the city on a monthly basis, and we want people to know that when they receive a Rehoboth Beach Beacon text or email, the information is important or time-sensitive. It's important for everyone, commissioners, residents, anyone who might be interested, to sign up now by sending the keyword and using a 6-digit message. Sign up is on the city's website and available on social media. Just a reminder that the police department will be a collection site for the DEA's National Prescription Drug Take-Back Day from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., April 30th at the police station lobby. The event provides a safe, convenient, and responsible way for residents to dispose of expired or unused prescription medications. And just a heads up for everyone that there will be a large crane located at the Rehoboth Museum parking lot coming up on Wednesday, May 11th, and the new HVAC equipment will be hoisted to the roof of the museum at that time. That's my report, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions of the city manager?
I do, Mayor.
Commissioner Srnowski?
The beacon replacing code red, Sharon, is there a reason for that? Is there a cost savings?
The cost is a little more with this. It will encompass a lot more ability to communicate in a more efficient way, and it's easier to be able to not only subscribe to it, but for the communications department to get the information out.
Okay, thank you. And last week there was work being done at the Lake Gerard pump station. Do you know what that was for?
Kevin?
Yes, Commissioner. During our video inspections this past winter, we discovered that there was a large hole in the pipe that feeds into the pump station, so the repairs are what we did last week.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody? Commissioner Sharp?
And just a quick kudos for those folks who really enjoyed the trash postcard that came out. I got a number of calls that was very welcomed, and just enjoyed seeing it from a lot of people.
Thank you.
And the design for that was from our communication specialist, Lynn
Yes.
Cohen. Thank you, Lynn.
Yes.
Anybody else? Next bit of business is City Solicitor's report.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple litigation updates. The Beach Walk case, remember we're at the Supreme Court on that. Hopefully this is the last stretch and that case is going to be finalized at some point. So the city's answering brief was filed on April 14, and we've got the appellant's response brief is due on April 29. So that'll be the last step in the briefing, and then likely the Supreme Court will have oral argument and we'll get a decision and finally close out that case. We're also in the Supreme Court in the Lingo versus Board of Adjustment case. Remember, this is the deck variance and how do you measure the outdoor deck and whether it's part of gross floor area or not. That is scheduled for an oral argument before the Supreme Court on Wednesday, April 27. So that's the last step in that one. We'll get a decision there as well. And that's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you, Glenn. By the way, the Ocean Bay Mart brief I just received, stamped and dated, and I'll be forwarding that to the commissioners, and then it will be put on the online portal for public access.
Just a curiosity, City Solicitor, the Supreme Court decision, can you guess when that might come
So on the,
on the Baymont?
so on Ocean Bay Mart, they'll get the final briefing in, then they can decide it without oral argument, but they're supposed to decide it within 90 days, what oftentimes happens. And then they'll wait the 90 days, then they'll say, may we have oral argument, which gives them another 90-day clock. So at the outside, it's 6 months. Hopefully, it's something sooner than that.
Thank you.
And City Solicitor, the oral arguments, so for example, the one on April 27th, is that open to the public?
It is open to the public. Supreme Court has a very small kind of galley for the public to see, but it is open, and if you get there, you're welcome to watch it. Just be sure you're there early because they close the doors, lock them up, and nobody comes in once the argument starts.
Thank you.
That's starts at 11:10 a.m.
And after the arguments on the Baymart, any ideas about how long it will take for a decision that followed?
Yeah, generally they take about the full 90 days if they're allotted. So it could be sooner, but probably 90 days for oral argument.
I would say most of the guesses have been wrong, so
Yeah, right.
temper
That's true.
temper that response.
That's true. They are the Supremes.
Very good, thank you very much. Next item of business is departmental reports. Embedded in the agenda is a fire department report, police department report, and building and licensing department report. I want to thank all of them for their time and effort and commitment to doing that every month. We appreciate it. And again, that's available for public viewing on the city portal at the agenda. With that, we're going to go to board and commission reports, and none have been supplied. So we'll go to the next thing, which is committee reports. Two committees have submitted written reports, Tree and Green Infrastructure Committee and the Boardwalk and Beach Committee, and they are not giving oral reports. Instead, they're asking you to go online and take a read of their reports. Thank you, Jay and Commissioner Gay, for doing those reports. Appreciate it. With that, we're going to go to liaison reports. Chamber of Commerce, the liaison to the Chamber of Commerce is Commissioner Gay, who of course is not here today. And Chamber President Carol Everhart is also not here today, so they sent me a list of chamber updates that are also embedded in the agenda on the city portal. Out of 24, I don't want to diminish the report, but there are 24 items, and I'm just going to read you four of the more important items that I see. Number one, the 2022 visitor guide has been delivered and is ready for distribution. Item number 6, there's a new event sponsored by the Chamber of Commerce called Restaurant Week. Supports the red, white, and blue. That's to be held June 5th through the 10th. Item 16, County Councilman Mark Schaefer will be the guest speaker at the next Rehoboth Beach, Dewey Beach General Membership Meeting on May 11th, talking about the need for workforce housing. And item number 22 of 24, summer and weekend schedules for both the Visitor Center and the Boardwalk kiosk have been established and staff is hired. If you recall, years ago, we had the Visitor took over management of the information kiosk at Delaware Avenue, and they resumed that task this year. So again, 24 items, thankfully, thoughtfully done by the chamber, are available on the city portal. With that, the next liaison report would be the Rehoboth Beach Historical Society. Commissioner Jay Legree is the liaison.
Thank you, Mayor. The amount that we had anticipated to mount the dolly sign on the museum was $35,000, and we think that's going to be fairly close. And we have gotten close to that amount. Anyone who has some extra bucks lying around that would like to be the one to put us over 35 is certainly welcome to donate, and it's very easily done on the website. So that's Rehoboth Beach Museum.org, and go there and give a couple bucks. Also, the video film that the museum showed, The Storm of '62, was really well received, and we're going to redo that on the 23rd of April. So if you missed it the first time and you'd like to see it again, or you'd like to see it when we show it again, give them a call, tell them you want to come, and we can do it. So that's The Storm of 62. It's a great, exciting video. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Any questions? If not, we'll go on to the next liaison, is Rehoboth Beach Main Street, Commissioner Ed Stranowski.
Thank you, Mayor. Just want to mention that last Saturday, or I'm sorry, 2 Saturdays ago, Rehoboth Beach Main Street had a strategy brainstorming session. We were fortunate to have the mayor and Commissioner Legree and some other business and community leaders join in that. They believe it was successful, and they got a lot of good feedback from the Homeowners Association and businesses and Mayor and Commissioner Legree. So I think that was successful, and it was a good part of their outreach into the community to make sure that they are incorporating the needs of all the stakeholders in town. Also, we've got 3 events coming up. April 29th is an Oldies Dance. That's from 7 to 10 p.m. Tickets are $25. Beer and wine and snacks are included. It's here at the Convention Center. And tickets can be purchased, I believe, at the door and also at the Rehoboth Beach Main Street office. On April 30th, there's a gumbo crawl that's from 1 to 4. Tickets are $20. Tickets can be purchased at the Rehoboth Beach Main Street office, and there are 16 different restaurants participating in that crawl where you get to try gumbo from each one of them. That's all I've got, Mayor. And I'll move into the Senior Center. I have no updates from the Senior Center today.
I believe somebody forwarded me a note from the Senior Center that in May, they are resuming their first breakfast.
Well, you got notified before I did,
So
Mayor.
I'd like confirmation, if you would, please.
I will.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Commissioner Stranowski? Anybody else?
I was at that discussion that we had on Saturday, and several of the folks were talking about the lack of affordable housing and what a tremendous impact that makes on their ability to hire people for the summer. And I had never realized, I thought I knew, but it is serious. The lack of affordable housing in this area, they can't get the visa kids because we can't house them near enough to where their workplace is. It's just one thing that stacks on top of another. We really need to attack affordable housing. And Councilman Schaefer's going to talk about that on the 11th, I think, isn't it? Yeah, on the 11th, Mark Schaefer. That should be a good meeting. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you. With that, we'll move beyond liaison reports. The next item of business is a public hearing for a permit of compliance and supplemental permit of compliance request by Robert Frankus of FRW Portfolio LLC to modify the floor plan of an existing restaurant serving alcoholic beverages with dining on a patio. This was previously known as Green Turtle Sports Bar and Grill, and now to be known as Above the Dunes, pursuant to the City of Rehoboth Beach Municipal Code, Section 215-11, modifications of floor plan, and Section 270-19, use restrictions, patios. The restaurant is located at 101 South Boardwalk, which of course is the southeast corner of Wilmington and the Boardwalk, again in the location of the former Green Turtle Sports Bar and Grill. I notice we have 2 representatives here from that restaurant. We'll get them to introduce themselves at the appropriate time. And with that, Glenn, do you want to introduce the topic, why we're here, what the process is, and identify the submittals in front of us?
Thank you, Mayor. So this is a permanent compliance hearing. It's been properly noticed, and we'll go through those publications in just a moment. Some things I want to put on the agenda, on the record. But recall, this is for restaurants serving alcoholic beverages. Section 215-4 of the City Code says a permanent compliance or supplemental permanent compliance shall not be issued to the applicant or to the Delaware Alcoholic Beverage Control Commission except by the favorable vote of a majority of the members of the city commissioners in reaching their decision. So in the decision that you're reaching today, commissioners, the commissioners shall consider the following factors, including but not limited to: whether the applicant has demonstrated that the establishment's primary purpose will be that of a restaurant or dinner theater as defined in this chapter, whether the establishment meets all of the city's applicable zoning and licensing provisions, whether the establishment would be a detriment to the peace, order, and quiet of the neighborhood of the city, whether the establishment will have an adverse impact on the neighboring properties or on the city of Rehoboth Beach, considering the impact on traffic, parking, and noise, whether the applicant had made any false representation or statements to the city's employees or the commissioners in order to induce or prevent action by the city, not only in regard to the pertinent pending application under this chapter, but also in regard to the issuance of a building permit or business license for the subject establishment. This is the Green Turtle location that's being converted to Above the Dunes. It's a license transfer for both a restaurant and a patio permit and supplemental permit of compliance. A few things that I want to put on the record that the commissioners have in their packet are the following. First, there's a public notice of this public hearing. It's dated March 29, 2022, and it was also posted on that same date, March 29, 2022. It's been sent to the residents within 200 feet of the location. It was published in the Cape Gazette on Friday, April 1st, 2022, in the Coast Press on Wednesday, April 6th, 2022, and in the Delaware State News on April 1st, 2022. The commissioners also have a building inspector's report dated April 9, 2022, and Mr. Janis will read that in a moment. In the packet is also an application for permanent compliance. It was received by the city secretary on March 22nd, 22. It's signed by Robert Francis. There's a stamp indicating the fee of $1,000 has been paid. The restaurant zoning code compliance checklist is attached. The dining patio zoning code compliance checklist is also attached. There's a sample menu in the packet. It was received by the secretary on March 22nd, 2022. There's also an existing floor plan in the packet, marked approved for the Green Turtle Rehoboth. So this is the existing floor plan. It's sheet number A102 dated December 22nd, 2008. It was approved by the city on February 2nd, 2009. There's also a proposed floor plan for the new Above the Dunes concept. It's sheet number A1.8. It's dated March 16, 2022, and has project number 210018, prepared by In Place Design. It was received by the city secretary on March 22nd, 2022. And there's a series of 6 renderings prepared by In Place Design that are dated November 2021. That's all I wanted to put on the record, and those are my comments, Mayor. If there are any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Glenn. I'd like to, Ann, if I could use the down camera, please. I'd like to clarify a few of the documents before we go next to the building inspector's report. Excuse me, I'd like to clarify a few things on the documents. The floor plan is given to us. Ann, can you zoom in as close as you can on this square here? It's rusty, hadn't been used in 2 years.
Mayor, is this the proposed or the existing floor plan?
This is the proposed, and I can talk us through it. What I wanted to point out here is that on the floor plan provided to us, there is the bar area here. It is very hard, if not impossible, to see that there are bar seats around here. In fact, for me and some others, it was very confusing, and that's why I'm up here, just to help clarify. Because right here, there's a row of tables and another row of tables, and it happens to be labeled as bar seating. So when you count up these tables and chairs here, you only come up with 24, and yet the application says there are 26. And so after a little detective work, we found that actually, even though you cannot see the bar stools around the old bar, because I thought they were getting abandoned, they are actually... Can you enlarge that at all, Ann, or just still temperamental. Anyhow, the point is, there are, on this extra document that I'd like to enter into the record, it is unlabeled, undated. The way we identify it is it's got 26 red checks around the bar identifying 26 bar seats, correct? It takes a younger person with sharper eyes to be able to see that there indeed are square bar seats underneath these checks. So this is a new document that the city is adding, if that's all right, just to clarify that indeed there are 26 bar stools listed on the application. Also, I'd like to clarify for the record real quick that I'd like to make a note on the record that these drawings, 6 drawings, are illustrative only, that they don't carry the weight of the floor plan. And the reason I'm saying that is because the table layouts and the chairs are a little different. In fact, this layout was probably done early because it actually shows what I think is a little different. But so anyhow, the point is, let's make these illustrative, and the floor plan itself is what we are actually going by. Any questions? Any questions? You're good? Thank you very much.
With that, Mary, do you want to go to the building inspector's report?
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, city staff, and thank you, public. Good to see everybody in live form again. Before you today is application 0322-02. It is a amended restaurant permit compliance and dining supplemental permit of compliance for Above the Dunes located at 101 South Boardwalk. This application is to amend the current issued permit of compliance for the restaurant formerly known as the Green Turtle. The revised floor plan and business license is to be known as Above the Dunes and includes a supplemental permit of compliance for an existing attached balcony area. The following is a complete report for the application referenced above to be heard. Pursuant to Section 215-3, the applicant is Robert Frankist, 311 East Wheel Road in Bel Air, Maryland, 21015. The name of the restaurant shall be Above the Dunes. The restaurant is a table service establishment serving lunch and dinner with a bar. Again, the restaurant is located at 101 South Boardwalk in Rehoboth Beach. Pursuant to the plans submitted, the following is true. The property is indeed located at 101 South Boardwalk. The owner is Boardwalk Properties, 3801 Kenneth Park, Building C, number 105, Greenville, Delaware, 19805. The existing structure is a 2-story building divided into separate commercial uses. The proposed and continuation of use located on the second floor is an A2 assembly restaurant with proposed permanent seated dining in the C1 Central Commercial Zoning District. Pursuant to Section 270-13C, 3 sub D, a restaurant serving alcoholic beverages is a permitted use. Next is a chart of the sizes that have been calculated by myself and provided by the applicant. Service area, kitchen facilities, storage, restrooms, employee stations, hallways, and utilities. That was actually undeclared on the application. I found it to be 4,066 square feet. The dining area is listed as 2,483. I have it calculated as 2,310, and I believe that is some corridors were counted in there mistakenly. Permanent seated dining is counted as 176. I have counted 176. The bar area, as Mayor Mills has pointed out, is 500 square feet. I've confirmed 500 square feet. And in fact, there is 26 tables, or 26 seats, excuse me, around that bar. The restaurant gross floor area is listed as 6,000 from the applicant. From the documents provided, I actually have that calculated as 5,876 square feet. The ratio of bar to permanent seated dining is 14.77%. I find that to be true. Pursuant to Section 215-1, definitions, the patio shall be a maximum of 750 square feet. The applicant has claimed that the patio is 750 square feet. I have actually measured that at 695. And it's important to remember that with the approval of the Green Turtle, there was an area sectioned off and fenced off that encompasses the 750. So if that fence were not there and taken down, it would go above and beyond the allowable 750. However, the applicant states that the screening or barricade or fence, if you will be kept in place. The designated areas for proposed food storage and preparation are shown and labeled on the attached plan. The distance to the nearest property lines of the nearest church, public park, and residential lot are as follows. St. Edmund's Catholic Church is approximately 1,403 feet by way of west on Wilmington Avenue, south on First Street. Lake Gerard, Lake Gerard, approximately 2,407 feet by way of west on Wilmington Avenue, north on First Street. And the closest residential lot, Zone C1 with an R2 use, is approximately 150 feet to the northwest. Address is 5 Wilmington Avenue. The applicant has stated that the approximate percentage of revenue between the sale of alcohol and food is 18% alcohol and 82% food. Authorization for the city to investigate is attached. Written and dated declaration by the applicant is attached, and the fee of $1,000 has been paid.
Thank you very much. Any questions of the building inspector? Mr. Czerniawski, go ahead.
Mr. Janis, on the proposed floor plan, there's, it looks like 2 tables called bar seating with 16 seats. That is included in the 26 around the bar or not? It's labeled bar seating, but that's actually 2 tables?
It is actually labeled as bar seating, but it is not technically bar seating. What we call as bar seating would be located around the bar.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Let me pass this down, and then if you would pass it back, and if anybody out there wants to see it. Again, that's the checks are identifying where the bar seats are. The bar seats are just, you have to strain your eyes to actually see where they are, but they're there. Are there any further questions by the commissioners? If not, this is a public hearing, correct? And before we go to the public hearing, we'll go to the applicant. Would you like to say anything, sell your program? Probably the easiest is to step up to the lectern. The microphone works a little better, and we could squeeze both of you in on one camera.
All right, there we go. Well, thank you for your time, commissioners and mayor. The reason why we are converting the restaurant is not because Green Turtle didn't serve the community well. We just feel like it was time for a update, something more modern, something that connected with the clientele of Rehoboth Beach. And as the inspector said, we didn't change much of it. It was more of just the interior renovation, making it very modern looking, didn't change the number of seats. So we just think it would serve the community better. And so we thought the investment of the time and effort would be more in line with what consumers are looking for.
Very good. Anything else? Any questions by the commissioners? I'd like to make mention that I was on the commission when we first heard your permit of compliance, and I voted in favor, by the way. But I remember there was one little controversial thing, and that is that the balcony overhangs public property. And one of the resolutions there was that the balcony railing had to be able to contain liquid or a glass if it was broken. Is that still in place? You're not renovating or removing any of that?
No, so we actually improved it last year. We put all new roofing material down. It still contains all of it, but it encased it better than what it initially did. So we had Delmarva Roofing come out, put a whole new bladder in. We replaced all the wood, really just improved it, made it, but it, yes, Mayor, it does contain it exactly as it was.
Still provides that safety feature that was originally requested
correct.
back
Yeah.
then. Very
we
good.
did not change the layout or anything exterior.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you very much. Anything further from the commissioners?
I just want to say it looks great. I think you did a good job, and it looks in line with what I would expect in a coastal community.
Thank you.
All righty. Thank you very much.
Okay.
We appreciate it. With that, we're going to open the public hearing. Is there any members of the public that would like to speak in favor, against, or general comments? No? Walter? Nope. Going once? Going twice? We'll close the public portion of this meeting and turn it over to the commissioners for further discussion, debate, and at the appropriate time, a motion. And of course, the motion would be to grant a restaurant permit of compliance and a dining patio supplemental permit of compliance for the reasons stated in the, normally in the motion. Any further discussion? Somebody want to make the motion?
Sure. Mayor, I move to grant a restaurant permit of compliance and a dining patio supplemental permit of compliance for what is to be known as Above the Dunes. I find the following to be true. The proper application for a restaurant permit of compliance and dining patio supplemental permit of compliance has been filed. The proper fee has been paid. The proper notifications have been made. That all parties wishing to be heard have been heard. That the primary purpose is that of a restaurant based on their application and menu submitted. That the restaurant and dining patio meet the city's applicable zoning and licensing provisions. That the restaurant and dining patio would not be a detriment to the peace, order, and quiet of the neighborhood and the city. That the restaurant and dining patio will not have any adverse impact on the neighboring properties or on the city of Rehoboth Beach, considering the impact on traffic, parking, and noise. That the applicant has made no false statements to the city employees or the commissioners. I therefore make a motion that the city manager issue the applicants a permit of compliance for the operation of a restaurant and supplemental permit of compliance for the operation of a dining patio to be associated with the restaurant.
Have a second?
Second.
We've got a motion by Commissioner Adjournment and a second by Commissioner Sharp to approve a permit of compliance for a restaurant permit of compliance and a dining patio supplemental permit of compliance for Above the Dunes Restaurant. Is there any further discussion? No. We'll just do a group vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? No, and the motion is carried 5-0. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you very much. We look forward to your new brighter colors in there when we next visit, and you don't have to stay around if you don't want to. Thank you.
Good luck.
Very good. Thank you. Next item of business is to conduct a public hearing on the subject of amending Rehoboth Beach Code, Chapter 270, which is the zoning code, by amending sections 270-4 and 270-46.1.2 and the small wireless communications facility design manual referenced in section 270-46.1.2 C1 0, or is that O? 0 or O? O, relating to tower-based wireless communications facilities, non-tower wireless communications facilities, and small wireless communications facilities, and providing further for the regulation of such wireless communications facilities. If you recall, this was actually scheduled at one point way in the past for a public hearing just for the amendment of the single item in the wireless code. And at subsequent meeting, we decided to hold off and wait for the public hearing for the design manual, and we've combined them together, and that's where we've come today to address both. Would like to make note that the process for today, we will hear from the public that would like to give their opinions on this, but I would like the program to go as follows. One is to present and discuss two new proposed amendments that we can determine are minor or not, but they might be perceived as minor proposed amendments. We'd like to go over those first and explain them. And then secondly, we'd like to address a letter we got from Mike Strange questioning the differential between variance and deviation. And then we received just last night comments by Verizon that we would like to read and address. And I will like to preface that with, I'm very disappointed that Verizon would have all these weeks and weeks and weeks to have responded, and they respond at literally the last second. But we're going to forge forward and see if we can't maybe resolve this today, hopefully. With that, I want to turn it over to Evan to review the two proposed changes that he came up with.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, Mayor, Commissioners, members of the public. So the first proposed amendment that we have to the wireless design manual would be to Section 8, which is the approval section. Currently, within the draft amendments to the wireless design manual, we include a reference to a code enforcement officer, and the code enforcement officer having the authority to pursue some of these approvals and ensure that any application or proposed wireless communication facility complies with the requirements of the design manual. The recommendation is to amend code enforcement officer to city manager or designees. Reason for that being is typically when we receive these applications, we sit down mostly with department heads from IT, building and licensing, public works, and review these applications and ensure that they comply, again, with the design requirements. Additionally, there has been conversation, certainly amongst the staff, but also amongst the Board of Commissioners, of having CTC review our wireless applications. So in that case, they would be a designee of the city manager. So that is the proposed amendment to Section 8 approval, in addition to the other amendments that are already proposed by CTC.
Any questions on that? Again, we can deem it as minor and act on it. We can also say that this needs to be postponed for one more meeting if you think it rises to that level, that big a change. Any questions on this one? Commissioner Legree?
I think this is significant. I think it puts a lot of pressure on whoever, because we're dealing with multi-million-dollar companies. It puts a lot of pressure on whoever the enforcement officer is, and the city manager has to load that on his or her shoulder. And I think we ought to have some way to back them up or to verify, to give them more backing to verify what's going on. I just have some real worries about what happens if a deviation rests on the back of the code enforcement officer.
Well, we're not at the deviation variance discussion yet. We're talking about who the designee is.
Yeah.
And that is merely a change from code enforcement officer to the city manager or designees.
Yeah.
So we're getting to the variance later.
I just explained why I believe that that's a really significant change. And
Well,
I went back to the difference between deviation, variation, and if it should or shouldn't exist. Go ahead.
Again, we're not at deviation variance discussion. We're at, can city manager or designees be substituted for code enforcement officer? That's the only change that he's making from the last time we saw this.
So the current, Commissioner, this current version of the design manual has a provision in it that would allow the code enforcement officer to determine whether a deviation is appropriate. What Evan is suggesting is that instead of saying it's the code enforcement officer, we're going to say it's the city manager, and then the city manager can designate whether it be the code enforcement officer or somebody else. So the only question right now is it a significant change if we, instead of the commissioner saying the code enforcement officer is the person who decides on deviations, instead, the ordinance
Say deviation.
I'm sorry?
Go on.
Yeah, so the question is it significant that you're changing from the code enforcement officer making these decisions to the building or to the city manager who can then designate? So it's just that language, code enforcement to city manager, that's being talked about now. That's Evan's suggested change. Then we'll have a larger discussion, I think, about whether anybody should be making deviations. So,
Thanks.
right.
Yeah, and Commissioner, just to address your comment too, just about having the additional backing, I think this proposed change from city manager or designees gives that additional backing because the city manager can designate somebody to grant a deviation, as opposed to it just being the code enforcement officer.
Mayor, if I will, I think it's a very minor change. At the end of the day, the city manager directs all city staff, including the code enforcement officer. And she can designate, or he or she can designate whomever they choose to take on certain responsibilities throughout the city. So this is a minor change and makes sense to me.
Would you like to delve into the variance versus deviation, or do you want to present your second proposed amendment?
At your discretion, Mayor.
Go ahead and
I
present.
have a quick question.
Yeah.
So do you have an example of, so if it was not the code enforcement officer, is there an example of who a designee might be?
Sure. So again, typically what we do during this review process is it's meeting with the department heads and then also the permit coordinator, permit technician. So it's usually the designees being the IT department director, public works director, building and licensing, chief building official, and myself sitting down to review these as a group. So we are sort of the designees in that case. Again, there has been discussion about turning the application review process over to CTC, our consultant, so that they can review them on our behalf, ensure that they comply with the design manual. So in that case, they would also be a designee.
Okay, thank you.
But Evan, or city manager, if we can just confirm, even if we do pass this over to the approval process to the third-party consultant, they're not going to approve anything that's out of the norm without the city manager's approval. They don't have that level of authority.
Correct.
But they are a person or persons or an organization that understands the code changes, understands I'd feel much safer to have the consultant be the one to, the designee by the city manager, and I'd vote yes if you would put that in the amendment. I will vote no if you don't.
So we
That's
know,
fine.
so we know your position, that's fine, but I'm fine with this and the ability to have the designee listed in there.
If I could just follow up on that, Commissioner Legree's comment, I agree that the third-party consultants should be the ones to recommend anything out of the norm. Should they be the approval of that? No. The city manager should still give the final stamp. But yeah, we should rely on their expertise to make a recommendation. And this gives the city manager the authority to allow that.
And I think, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Sam, go ahead.
No, just for me, the narrowness of what we're talking about, which is validated already. We're just talking about the ability for the city manager themselves or to designate. Right. That's the very narrow road we're on right now. I have no problem with that. It feels minor to me.
Thank you. Let's go to proposed amendment number 2, and then we'll come back to variances and deviations.
Sure, thank you, Mayor. So on the screen is the proposed small WCF zone map with the green area here shown as the residential zone. And one of the things that we had neglected to include in this map was the east side of Surf Avenue and the continuation of Henlopen Avenue down to Deauville Beach. So in the proposed amendment, we just include that area shown here.
So it's outline it. It's an L-shaped
Yes.
additional area to the map that was merely overlooked and came to light actually with a more recent application for Verizon to install a antenna at the end of Pennsylvania Avenue. Any questions on that?
Seems minor to me.
Very good. Thank you, Evan. With that, let's go to Mike Strain. Do you want to, I know we've got your letter. It's fairly clear. Do you want to orally articulate anything first or go second so that we can address some of your concerns about the variance versus deviation?
Sorry, Mayor, should we not hear Evan's proposal before we dive into public comment on it?
Well, there are, it's actually not a proposal. It is actually presented in the previous version.
Okay, understood.
So this red line version here has actually got changes number 1 proposed, but it also has red line version that was from.
Right, so two
our-
and
our
3
previous.
were existing already.
Correct, except for the reference to code enforcement officer and city manager. Is that correct?
Understood. Thank you.
You want to go?
Yes.
And we'll consider this part of the public hearing since this is a,
Yeah, that'd be fine. So any of the public that talks will include as part of the public hearing. Would you state your name and address
Michael
for us?
Strange, 4 Stokely Street. And I want to address specifically the first part that was just discussed with regard to the designated person to review an application. Commissioner Chernowski made the comment about out of the ordinary. I think it has to be made exceedingly clear that whoever the designee is by the city manager or anyone for that matter, whether it's the outside consultant, it's to enforce the law as written, period. Not, gee, I think you could put up a 100-foot pole when our law specifically calls out you can't put in a 100-foot pole. When our law specifically calls out you have to put in a 50-foot pole. And there was some confusion by the commissioners with regard to, well, if you appoint someone, where does their authority begin or end? And I think, Mayor Mills, what you said in your presentation is this is strictly about appointing that the manager can appoint whoever she wishes or he wishes to review the applications, but not any further than meeting the law. That's the second part of this, which I think is what is proposed with regard to the question of whether it's a variance or a modification that goes beyond the law. Because in every other capacity, the building inspector, as an example, cannot grant variances or go above the law. He has to present it to either, or the applicant has to present it to the planning board, depending on the circumstances, or to the Board of Adjustment. So I think that clarity is extremely necessary, that the mayor, the city manager can appoint whoever they wish to act on their behalf, but it has to be in conformance with the law as written. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any response? It seems to me that would be the norm for how you operate and will operate.
Correct, Mayor. Would be the norm.
The way that I thought about and considered anything out of the norm, and we're talking about not the ordinance, but this change is in the design manual, is something that wasn't contemplated in the design manual, or something that we've not yet thought about as things change as they do. If something says it needs to be 10 feet, then it needs to be 10 feet. That's not at all what I consider anything out of the norm, whether you want to, I'm using that word, but deviation or variance, whatever it may be, that's what I consider that. But again, at the end of the day, we have laws, and it's the city manager's job to uphold that, whether she's doing it, or he or she is doing it themselves, or providing a designee to do that. I see this as being things that have not yet been considered or are not clear in the design manual.
Thank you.
That's, Ed just made my point.
Evan, do you want to do any clarification, or Glenn, and/or Glenn?
I'm happy to comment a little bit, Mayor, on this topic, because it is one that I think Mr. Strange has brought to the forefront and illuminated, and it's not an easily understandable topic, and here's kind of why, in my view. So zoning regulations, remember I've said this repeatedly, zoning regulations are intended to regulate private property, right? The private individual's property, and there's all kinds of checks and balances that have been put in place to ensure that the government doesn't overreach as it relates to private property. But here we're talking predominantly about installations on public property, right? This is generally installations of wireless facilities on the city's land or the state's right of way, or, but generally not on a private owner's property. So when we originally considered where we should put these wireless facility regulations, I questioned whether they should be in the zoning code, because the zoning code is private property and we're dealing predominantly here with public property. So the reason they ended up in the zoning code, and I think it was the appropriate location to put them after studying it a bit myself, is the police, we needed to be able to take advantage of the police power. And the police power is not traditional policing. It's the police power that gives you as commissioners the ability to regulate property and the use of land. So it made sense to put it in the zoning code, but now overlay that with the idea that the Board of Adjustment was set up as a checks and balance to make sure that the use of private property, the government is not overreaching, and where an owner needs a variance from what's been established in the zoning code, the Board of Adjustment's been established to do that. So we're kind of in a quasi-public, quasi-private zone here, dealing with how do we deal with what happens on your property, the public property that you're given control over. Remember, generally I've said zoning regulations don't apply to the use of public lands, the city's lands. And in fact, if you look at our zoning map, none of the city's property is zoned. So there's no zoning that applies to it. When we built this facility, for example, we tried, and I think we did in the end, comply with the city's zoning laws. But the reality is the city could have built a building higher than is required, or violated a setback, because generally zoning laws don't apply to this, to the public lands. So we're trying to do a deal where we're meshing public and private objectives and zoning issues. So I think in this instance, what we've done is there's preferred options. So if you look at the design manual, when an application comes in, whether it's a small wireless or a tower-based, there's preferences, there's tiered preferences. So I think two things. One is that the allowance of a deviation is for purposes, and we specifically use the word deviation versus variance to make clear that this isn't a traditional Board of Adjustment variance, because Board of Adjustment generally regulates private property, not public property. So we switched to the word deviation to try to put some clarity into that issue. Here, a deviation, I think, would allow the city manager or the city manager's designee to say, while this is the preferred tier, for some reason that the applicant has demonstrated, the preferred tier doesn't make sense in this instance. To meet the objectives of the ordinance, maybe the second tier makes more sense, and the designee or the city manager would be allowed to deviate to that second tier. The other thing that I think this allows for is, remember, the federal law says that that a municipality cannot have an effective prohibition on wireless implementation. So I think if we get in a scenario where we've got this wonderful design manual, but if you implement it according to the letter and the word and the sentences that are written, we effectively prohibit the implementation of wireless. We can't do that because we lose that case. So this allows a slight, not a slight, it allows for somebody within city government to have some flexibility to say, this is an effective prohibition, and we have to allow for some deviation of what the four corners of the design manual provides for. But admittedly, this is not simple black and white stuff, because we're overlaying public and private lands into a zoning code that generally deals with private lands. And Mr. Springs wants to respond, and if you would care to.
Well, any commissioner questions first?
Go ahead, Jay.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Prohibition of the ability to deliver service, I couldn't explain it. I wouldn't know. The consultant would. And we have heard that from Verizon. In the very beginning, we heard them telling us things that proved just not true. I didn't know any different. I don't think any of us knew any different. Consultant did. And I think that's a valuable point. And to go outside the design manual is, for me, to go beyond the law. And we need to figure out how we're going to handle that. I expect that the city manager could handle it, but those multinational companies put a tremendous amount of pressure on you. We found that out with the myriad of applications that we were having to deal with. And I just think we ought to straighten that out before we say can appoint anybody. You need to appoint somebody who knows what's going on. Thank you, Mayor.
I was not confused until the city solicitor, through your example, Glenn, maybe you could take it one step further for me in very, very simple language. Or in your example that you just gave a few moments ago, are you saying that what I thought we were all in agreement with, that enforcing the law is the norm of what we do?
Yes.
And you're not tying this, are you, to an ability to skirt the law or to, I hate to use the word, but I'm going to deviate or have a variance of the law? I need to have that broken down a little more clearly.
Right. So I think that the objective here is to provide some flexibility. I mean, certainly every application is going to be viewed in the context of, does it satisfy the design manual? If it does satisfy the design manual, we stop, we're good, it gets approved, and we move on. If, however, for either purposes that serve the city or purposes that serve the applicant, for example, if the applicant cannot roll out services because of something that's in the design manual, and an application has been filed, and our consultant or the city manager and their designee come to the conclusion that the applicant's right, we are effectively prohibiting the rollout of wireless based upon this requirement in the design manual. This gives the city some flexibility to say, what's the smallest deviation we can make from the design manual to still be consistent with federal law that says we can't prohibit the rollout. I mean, I wouldn't mind language that says something along those lines. The least deviation that, that the least deviation from the design manual that still satisfies federal law that allows. I mean, I'd have to think it through, but that's the objective. Is not for, the city shouldn't be deviating far from the design manual for some reason that doesn't make sense, and neither should the city be deviating for the applicant for a reason that doesn't make sense. So
Let's go to Mike. State your name again.
Mike Strange, 4 Stokely. And this is a complex issue. And I agree with what Glenn said. You can't have an effective prohibition with regard to the law in the 2018 declaration by the Federal Communications Commission. However, there's another part of that law, which is extremely important and was adjudicated by the Ninth Circuit 2 years ago. And that specifically says that you're allowed to put and the following 3 criteria for non-exempted requirements. They must be reasonable, and they must not be more burdensome than applied to other infrastructure. not just 5G, 4G, 7G, 6G, or anything else or wireless, any other infrastructure. That means sewer, water, highways, power. It's what do you do for the benefit of society within your city? And the third one is they have to be published in advance. We have those published in advance. You're doing that right now. We have a CDP, which has the force and effect of law. They apply to wireless installations. The totality of our law applies to wireless installations. As Glenn pointed out, we can't do things that stop them from doing it, but we can list requirements that meet these three non-exempted criteria. Now, I would like to point out that 2 months ago, you got a letter from Verizon at the last minute, again, and they've been doing this for 2 years, the same with AT&T. And a representation was made by the Verizon representative, Ms. Metz, that she said you couldn't do this. That was legally wrong information. And at that meeting, the virtual meeting, I called her out on that. And it's my understanding that the city has received an apology or a recantment of her statement. Is that correct?
Not that I recall.
Verizon did provide sort of an amended version of their comments that are consistent with the Ninth Circuit ruling that Mr. Strange is referring to.
Right. So they recant. What they said was factually incorrect. It was a material misrepresentation of the law. They were stating something that had been vacated 2 years ago. And AT&T agreed with them in another email that went to the city. Now, I have no idea if AT&T, in the form of Mr. Divis, has recanted his comment, which was a material false statement of fact. And I don't know, Glenn or Mayor, has that happened? Is that in the public record? So the false information is in the public record because it was read into the public record by Glenn, which was an appropriate thing to do. But it was false information that then was recanted. And what bothers me as a citizen, forget all the technical scientific facts, Verizon and AT&T have repeatedly done this for the last 2 years. You have not been in the position as commissioners to give informed consent because you haven't been given all of the facts from the people that are supposedly the knowledge experts. You've been misled repeatedly, over and over and over again. And I find that appalling, which is why I responded so vehemently to the fact that I agree that with the city manager should have the ability to assign others to evaluate proposals. However, those proposals, based on our current design manual and our code, must be met per the code. They do not represent any kind of effective prohibition whatsoever. In fact, they're so lenient, they're appalling, even though your consultant has said, here's what you need to do. They're exceedingly soft, exceedingly. I'm going to demonstrate that in a few minutes when we get to that part of the discussion. But this is on the first issue. Nothing we have currently represents an effective prohibition whatsoever, and we are fully within our rights under the federal law to do exactly what we're doing per the code. That's all I have to say on that subject. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Mayor, could I ask a question of Mr. Strange? Mr. Strange, you said that we've been misled and have not gotten good advice or information. Is that still current? I mean, we've had for the last 8 months, a consultant that I believe has been led us in a good direction to where we're at now. Do you disagree with that?
Yeah.
Generally speaking, I agree with virtually everything that they've said, with the exception of best available technology economically achievable. Their background and experience in that field is virtually non-existent. And so that's led you down a lane that I think is inappropriate. The science and the facts are quite significant. I've dumped a whole series of letters over the last 8 months to you, it's quoting science, quoting facts. quoting it from several academic institutions, all the research associated with it as to why you need to do this. Have you been given bad information explicitly by the consultant? No, this consultant is far better than the previous one that you had. And the majority of what they've stated is reasonable. However, it's also technically outdated from a physical perspective. And so I don't want, I have to keep the conversation to this particular subject, correct, Mayor? So I can't go into the next level, which is the details. So yes, you've been given reasonable information. Have you been given the best information? No. Have you been given information that reflects the totality of science as relates to RF and physics and the environment? No. But it's still better than what you had. I guess that's the best way I can describe it.
Understood. One last question on this specific topic. It sounds to me, and from your letter, that you object to number 2 here, given the city manager or a designee the authority to approve a deviation.
Absolutely correct.
And so your proposal is any deviation needs to go to the Board of Adjustment. That's what you've stated?
I felt that that would be an appropriate approach. However, as Glenn points out, we're now getting into an area that gets to be a sticky wicket. So I think at that point, at a very minimum, what it means is it has to be presented to the mayor and the you as commissioners to say, do we want to permit this? Now, there's a shot clock involved here with regard to the FCC, which you have X amount of days to do that. However, the shot clock only begins when you physically accept and sign in the application. So what you do is you don't physically and sign it in. You go through a dialogue, as you would with most people, except in this particular case, the wireless industry, because they're not covered by the Public Utility Commission, which is another piece of this pie. Delmarva Power is. Verizon, AT&T, and all the other 50 of the major carriers are no longer covered by the Public Utility Commission, which raises a whole series of other things. When you grant a specific interest to a wireless provider to put an installation on public property, you lease it to them and you charge them a rent, that's on public property that all citizens have an undivided interest in. And it raises a second question with regard to who can approve that if it's not already on an area that's covered by Delmarva Power that has a pre-existing condition that's on a map that has granted to them the right to use that property. This gets complicated and keeps getting more complicated as we go. But it's a reality. And unfortunately, what's happened here in the last 2 years, in particular because we've had to deal with them, Verizon and AT&T, and I'm not just talking, I'm a Verizon shareholder. I also own AT&T, a very minor shareholder. But they had $20 billion in free cash flow. They have a little more discretion in what they do than we do. So we have to protect ourselves in a fair and reasonable manner. And that hasn't been happening. And I think we have to stand up and do that, which is what this is about. So it's a rather long answer to your question, is that yes, the city manager should have the privilege to assign whoever they want to review the application, but they should have zero ability to grant a variation to the published specs. And the published specs, I can tell you as a scientist, as an engineer, as an FCC licensed commercial technician, our specifications are so loose. They're amazingly loose. And if a wireless provider can't fit it within that, it's worthless.
Thank you, Mike. Obviously, this is a brand new area for us, right? I doubt that it's perfect. I think it's pretty darn good overall. But in the realm that it's not perfect, I think we're going to learn over time with applications that some things maybe rise to the level that they need to be reviewed, critiqued, edited, if you will, amended. And so for me, the question is, who does that amending? Who should be the one to see this again? And I think probably, since the mayor and commissioners created it, it should be the mayor and commissioners that have the opportunity to review it and find out that something's not working and let them be the judges of it. So is that a viable route forward?
It is, but let me, if I could, suggest maybe some minor amendments to what's on the screen right now. So section 1 of, or subsection 1 of section 8, which is the approval section, provides that the city manager can designate someone to determine whether a proposed small WCF design complies with the requirements of this design manual. So that's the city manager saying, either I'm going to do it or I'm going to assign it to somebody else. And if it satisfies all of the criteria, then it can be approved. Subsection 2 says, however, if there's a request for a deviation, it again says it's going to be considered on a case-by-case basis, and the city manager or the designee shall be approved upon a determination by the city manager or designee that such variance or such deviation is in the best interest of the city or necessary to avoid the effective prohibition of wireless service pursuant to the rules of the Federal Communications Commission. So in this instance, perhaps, when there's a request for a deviation, maybe there shouldn't be a designee. Perhaps that if you're going to allow for deviation, that should fall on the city manager's shoulders. They can designate and have people like filtering them up information, but perhaps the city manager should be the one who makes the final decision on a deviation. The other thing that I would suggest is where it says, shall be approved upon a determination by the city manager or designee that such deviation is in the best interest of the city or necessary to avoid an effective prohibition. Perhaps that should be changed to that such deviation is the least deviation necessary to comply with the objectives of this manual, Chapter 270 of the City Code, or necessary to avoid the effective prohibition of wireless service pursuant to the rules of Federal Communication Commissions. That at least says it's got to be the least deviation. It's got to be supporting the objectives of this manual and supporting Chapter 270, or in order to avoid a prohibition. So that, I think that tightens it some. It's not going to be a solution that Mr. Yeah.
But it does add a,
Further checks and balances a little bit.
yeah.
So, City Solicitor, can you just clarify that? Because very early in our conversation, I wrote down best interest of the city versus enforcing our laws.
Mm-hmm.
So, in what you just described, does that support more strongly enforcing our laws?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, just stop with the word yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And this may be a stupid question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Can the city manager make her designee the commissioners and the mayor?
No, I think, ultimately, if he wanted to be the commissioners or mayor, we should write into the manual that.
But based on this language, could he or she do that?
Well, I think that the city manager could say, it falls on my shoulders to make this decision, but this one is in an area that
Right.
I don't feel comfortable doing without bringing it to the commissioners, and the city manager could say, Mayor, will you please put this on an agenda, so I want to present it and see if you're, yeah.
Because I was just looking at the broadness of that statement, the designee, without any parameters on it, and I thought, well, city manager could escalate up in any case if one wanted to, based on that language. Okay.
And just as,
I would see that if she escalates up, that it would be that the mayor and commissioners would put it on an agenda.
Right.
And
Of
talk
course.
about it,
Of course.
not interfere or participate in.
And I was just wondering about the latitude that one would have, that if a city manager needed the perspective of the mayor and the commissioners, that would honestly, technically allow it.
Right.
Yeah, and going through the
Right,
same
right,
process.
Right, the city manager couldn't designate the responsibility to you, but they could have sort of informed consent
Correct.
by bringing it to you and asking you.
And that's what I mean by the question. Okay. Thank you.
City Solicitor, just as background, my recollection is, I mean, this has been going on a long time, but we had many meetings where we were discussing whether these should go to the mayor and commissioners or the city manager. and made the decision that it should be the city manager, not
That's right.
not the
It's my
mayor and
recollection.
commissioners.
It's my recollection as well.
Glenn, could you just, I'm trying to contemplate what a deviation would be. And in the design manual, we have preference number 1, preference number 2. Say if I want to put I'm on the board, I want to put something on the boardwalk. Well, we say, well, it needs to be on the west side of the boardwalk. And so my thought is, if that is impossible for some reason, and we have to go to the second preference of that, what's listed in the design manual, that is what I am thinking is a deviation. And to me, it's not really a deviation because it's already considered in the design manual that if preference 1 doesn't work, then we go to preference 2, preference 3. Is that the deviations that we're considering?
I think that would be the vast majority of the deviations. And Evan and I have talked briefly about this, is that's sort of the intent, is that there's preferences there, and it allows for the carrier to make an argument why preference 1 doesn't work and why we should move to preference 2 or 3.
I mean, in that case, I think it's perfectly reasonable for the city manager, with the recommendations or advice from a consultant, the experts, I think that's completely reasonable. Now, if we're talking about, I can't even think of something, but
Well,
I can't even think of something other than
some egregious example where they say nothing works on the boardwalk and therefore we need to put a new tower. It's going to be right at, in the main area at the end of the bandstand on the boardwalk. We're going to put a tower with a bunch of, that would be egregious. And would this language allow for the city manager to approve that deviation from the design manual? And I hope this language where I'm suggesting that we say it's the least deviation necessary would prohibit a city manager from saying, that's fine, build that tower. 'Cause there's no way that's the least deviation necessary.
Right. So I agree that language that you've added is good, and I think we should add that to section 2.
Well, it also says, necessary to comply with the objectives of this manual. So the deviation has to be something that's necessary to comply with the objectives of the manual as well. And so that tower would not be in any way consistent with the objectives of the manual.
If I could, Mayor, just ask 2, I think will be very short answers from the city solicitor. My recollection is the design manual is not in the zoning code, but referenced in the zoning code.
Right.
And it's not clear whether this has the full force and effect of law, because my thought that you were bringing it to a public hearing out of an abundance of caution because it's referenced. It's not in the zoning code. Can you just sort of remind us of your thoughts?
It's referenced in the zoning code, and I think that while the design manual in some ways has some aspirational goals, I do think it has the force of law because of that reference, and that's why I ultimately concluded that we had to bring it to a public hearing consistent with a change in zoning laws, because it's effectively part of the zoning code.
Okay. That's all I've got. Thank you.
If we are just moving within the design manual, preferences within the design manual 1, 2, or 3, and I might have misunderstood what Commissioner Czarnowski was saying, that would seem to me like that would be within the scope of the law, and it's in the design manual, and it's allowed in the design manual. My problem is with the telecommunications companies telling us that we are prohibiting, by not allowing them to do A, B, and C, we are prohibiting them having the ability to service their customers, and therefore we cannot do that. I just can't. I don't believe what they're telling me, for one thing. We have evidence of that. And by the way, Julie never did have a chance to refute the testimony of Ms. Metz. But if we can't decide whether or not they're outside the law, we should have the consultant tell us that we are not prohibiting them. It's within our law, and they should go ahead and do it. If it's if it's not a deviation beyond the law, then it's legal within the design manual. I'm not sure I'm following what we're talking about, but
So I think you're right that there's already tiered preferences in the design manual. And this language probably is not necessary to allow the city to move within those tiers. So being candid, this language is intended to address the circumstances that nobody anticipates and hopefully gives some flexibility to the city to deal with them. But be clear, I mean, this language can be removed and the whole design manual doesn't fall apart. So if you're completely uneasy with that language in subsection 2, you have an option today to suggest that it's not in the manual. And to the extent you get a bunch of applications and we realize the city doesn't have the flexibility it needs and we end up in federal court because we're effectively prohibiting the rollout of wireless, then you have an opportunity to come back and address it through a future ordinance. I mean, I hope that nobody has suggested that the entire design manual fails if this language is not included.
so if we ask them to follow design manual, and as someone who knows far more about it than I do, has said that it's terribly lax, I think they should have to legally tell us that this is not allowed and that we are prohibiting their service. Am I making that clear?
It's clear to me. I mean, it's a matter of whether you're persuading your fellow commissioners.
Well, they threatened us, when was it? The second meeting, the gal said that we were going, the lawyer said that we were going to, she was thinking about taking us to court, if you recall. And we finally threw up our hands, and now we find out that she would have gotten nowhere just because we wanted to have aesthetic improvements. And that's my problem. The consultant could tell me things and it'd be fine. And if the city manager would make that decision in consultation, no pun intended, with the consultant, I'd be happy.
I think that's realistic, and I think that'll happen, absolutely. I favor acting on this today, frankly, and I favor the amendment that Glenn gave to us.
Agreed.
Allowing the city manager the opportunity to issue deviations or something. I've got full confidence in whoever the city manager is going to be to be able to act appropriately and on behalf of the commissioners and our wishes as we express them through the design manual and the wireless code.
Is there a way, Glenn, that we could direct the city manager to confer with a consultant and be legally able to do that? Because if she confers with me, it's over. I don't know anything.
I don't think it's necessary. That's part of the city manager's job.
Well, it anticipates that the city will always have a wireless consultant, and we don't know how long we'll have CTC on
Yes.
board. I mean, in the egregious example I gave of a tower on the boardwalk, I mean, I don't think any city manager would approve that sort of an egregious deviation without bringing it to you, because that city manager would no longer have a job.
Or
And it
else
doesn't.
You got a rogue city manager.
Right.
And you wouldn't want that individual anyway, so.
Yeah, I would like to have it so that she doesn't ask, or he doesn't ask me or someone who's not qualified. There's going to be tremendous pressure put by these $30 billion free cash flow companies to get what they want. And I remember hearing when they were wanting 18 poles on the east side of the boardwalk, I remember someone said, well, they're in the driver's seat. Well, they weren't. And the Sixth Circuit was plowed under by subsequent rulings, and I don't know how she didn't know that. But, okay, I've said what I want to say.
All right. So
Commissioner, we can't put every nuance in the city code. The city manager has a job, she gets direction from us, and he or she has direction from us, and we have to trust that they're going to do what we expect them to do. And if they don't, we have the ability to get rid of them.
And our direction will be to have her confer with the consultant.
I mean, I think we've all agreed here today that that is
No.
what we expect.
Yeah, that's the expectation. We voiced it. Even the new city manager would hear this from us. But I don't see any reason to codify this, that the city manager must confer with consultant. I think it's going to happen, and we're going to be watching.
Mayor, can I just ask the city solicitor to just weigh in on one more thing? Glenn, it's your position that it would be inappropriate for any deviation to go before the Board of Adjustments, correct? I think that's what we've heard from you today.
Generally, the Board of Adjustment is established to regulate private property, right, to look out for the interests of the private property owner. And I think that's why they're in place, is to ensure that where government overreaches, there's a checks and balance to allow for deviations from or variances from the zoning code.
So any substantial deviation or anything that is egregious, we are relying on the city manager to identify that and say, okay, this rises to the level that it needs to be referred to the mayor and commissioners for discussion.
Right.
I'm fine with that.
And before that step were to be taken, I would expect the city manager, and I think anybody would, that comes forward with all valid information, including that of an outside consultant.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Yeah, I imagine that any city manager is going to refer to legal and subject matter experts before escalating it to that level. And that's what I would expect, and I'm fine with the way it's written.
We can imagine and expect and assume all we want. Counselor, are we okay imagining, expecting, and assuming? Is that all right?
I think the issue here really is that we're trying to provide, sort of a code provision that recognizes that we can't anticipate every single thing that's going to come in the door. And this allows, yes, you're going to be relying upon the city manager to be able to, and her team or his team to be able to identify, what is this something that needs further oversight or not? I think if we're dealing with a setback and it's, a 6-inch issue and the carrier has presented a comprehensive reason why that 6-inch deviation is necessary, that's probably something that can be handled without bringing it to the mayor and commissioners. But, my thinking is that based upon the press that we've had recently in the various coastal towns, we're going to be very, very reluctant to grant any sort of a deviation, and anything that seems even a little bit squeamish is going to be coming here.
Yeah, this is going to hit us full blast in the face, the 5G thing. So you would suggest that we remove city code officer from the...
So what I would, let me read it so we have it straight. So in section 2, I would say, any requests for a deviation from the requirements of this design manual shall be considered on a case-by-case basis by the city manager, not say or designee, and shall be approved upon a determination by the city manager that such deviation is the least deviation necessary to comply with the objectives of this manual, Chapter 270 of the City Code, or necessary to avoid the effective prohibition of wireless service pursuant to the rules of the Federal Communications Commission.
I like it.
Ditto.
Well, the only thing I can say is I look back at my notes from March 7th when our city solicitor was talking, and he drew out our language may need to be reviewed and improved over time. So I always try to think, okay, if we find, because what is obviously troubling to me is it seems like the players may not always have our best interest at heart. And they're showing that by example of submitting things at the 11th hour. And I do recall that we did get an amendment shared with all of us about the previous statements that had been made. But as long as we keep a close eye on this and we continue to try to make sure we have every piece of language in place that we need, that gives me a bit more confidence. Because I have great confidence in us. I don't have confidence in the other side of the equation, obviously. Because I believe there's still something going on that I periodically hear in Dewey, that agreements that have been made with the town have not been lived up to by the carrier. So that demonstrates a lack of goodwill. When you make agreements, it seems only logical you live up to them or make a new agreement. So I can feel better about where we are today without continuing to try to talk this issue to death.
Thank you. Thank you. If it's all right, we'll move on to the next thing. Do we want to address Verizon's letter? Or is there anything in there that
Well, I mean,
gives anybody pause?
On the last topic, we were just talking about, Mayor, that they suggest that we add a waiver that says the city manager may grant waivers, sort of a blanket carte blanche. I think that, no, we're going to limit it to the language we just talked about. But I don't think there's anything else in there. Evan, was there that?
No, I mean, I think sort of my comments back are that there are certain things in there that they say may not be able to be met. For example, meter height at a requirement of 8 feet above the ground. So they're saying that Delmarva requires the meters to be located at least 6 feet or less. I think what we've just discussed would be a deviation to allow them to put the electric meter just a little bit lower. Glenn talked a little bit about setbacks. I mean, I think, and some of the relocation of poles, if it has to go another 6 inches or things like that. So I think really what we've discussed today sort of addresses some of their main concerns within that letter.
Right, the other one is they don't seem thrilled about our language that says the city may require additional aesthetic requirements that are reasonable in that they are technically feasible and reasonably directed to avoiding or remedying the intangible public harm of unsightly or out of character deployments. That language comes directly from the Ninth Circuit Code. They would like us to add, if published in advance of an application, which they're correct that the standards have to be published, but I think the publication is happening through the design manual, so I don't think it's necessary that we add that additional language.
So Mayor, when would we be voting on this?
It's at the pleasure of the commissioners. We will finish the public hearing, and then if the commissioners want to further discuss it, they can. If they want to continue it, they can. My preference would be that we actually vote on it today. Anything further from the commissioners up here? Nope. Mike, you want to?
You're voting only on the first issue, correct?
No, the expectation would be that we would hopefully get a motion to adopt the single code change in the wireless code, and then adopt the amendments to the design manual, including the two proposed amendments that were presented today, which is this with the new language that Glenn gave, as well as the map modification.
Okay, because initially you said you were going to separate them and we'd have a chance to talk about the second one, which now you're combining it together.
It would be my intent, yeah. Do you have something else you'd like to say?
Yes, and which I think supports both positions.
We need you up here.
It's going to be a show and tell as well. I'm not aware of Verizon's letter because that wasn't posted when I left this morning.
We literally received it late Sunday night, or no, Monday night, last night.
With regard to the first position, with Glenn has stated a way to create a variation to give the city manager the ability to approve minor variations to it. That makes rational sense. However, I would submit as a secondary issue, which hasn't been brought up here, with regard to the published in advance and the codes and the impact, whether or not it can go to the Board of Adjustment, because that was for private land. I'd like to remind everybody that the Planning Commission deals with the totality of land in the city. And the CDP is in fact a relevant document that relates to this. And in fact, an argument can be made when installations are put on public property. If they do not comport to the CDP, it really has to go to the Planning Commission. And that addresses the issue of things that aren't private property, because in the case of private property, if it deviates sufficiently from our zoning code and that determination is made by Matt, it ends up going to the Planning Commission. It's uncharted territory for municipalities around the country. And municipalities are reacting slower than obviously the rollout is occurring with these companies, and that creates tangible difficulty. So I think, personally, the things that I was saying as an expert in the field, is not saying anything detrimental to the potential future manager or the previous city manager. It's that balance, and I think Glenn's approach and what he's stating as to how to approach it seems to be a reasonable compromise, but there's still unsettled law out there as to where this stuff goes on public land, and should the Planning Commission be involved? That's the first one. The second one was, which you had said that we would discuss, is with regard to the manual itself, and my comments that the manual as it exists, and I made the comment that it's still, for reasons that I don't understand, which I stated, you have not wanted to put in best available technology, economically capable. And I still am flummoxed by that. And I think it's because you all have been receiving propaganda for the last couple of years that have led you down a path that is not in your best interest.
I want to let you know I object to that, because
Okay,
you can't
well-
make any assumptions about my thinking or philosophy or analysis of anything, Mike.
Okay.
Nothing.
I accept that.
Thank you.
But if we look at what is currently in the manual, and I made the comment earlier that it's exceedingly liberal currently, and in fact, the basis of it is based on technology in some cases that's 100 years old. And the thing that just came up in Verizon's objections to the meter, it couldn't have been better placed, and I'd like to give an example. This is, I used a box mock-up as opposed to a real meter pan because they're currently going for about $150 because of supply chain problems. But I did happen to have a meter. This is an older style, but it perfectly matches the ones that you see, although the ones now are more internet capable. But this basic technology is 100 years old. 100 years old. The mechanism by which this works has been in place for 100 years. Delmarva Power still uses it. It's been 100 years. And it's the installations that are going in currently that you're seeing look like this. The only thing is they're gray. But it's 100-year-old technology. The thing I want to point out is, if you look at our code that we're going to implement in our wireless code, it talks about the scale and size of ancillary equipment that you install on the wireless device. Not the antenna, but the other goodies that have to be put in there, which are needed. And this basically is one. Now, depending on the frequencies in use within the city, depending on the number of carriers, you're going to have between 100 and 400 of things that look like this mounted on poles throughout the city. Now, the reason I said our code is exceedingly liberal, because the way it was written and recast by CTC allows you to do this. But the question is, why would you do that? If you had best available technology written into the code, you could do this. Now, you'll notice that this is a lot smaller than this. It actually uses less energy and it's more accurate than this, which is what Delmarva Power uses. And the comment was made in Verizon's objection. They said, well, Delmarva Power requires it to be at a given height. That is a preference by Delmarva Power. That's what they do as their, quote, standard practice. It is not a requirement of the Public Utility Commission. It is not required as a law of physics. It is not required as a law of safety. It's not required of any standard. It's just the way they've always done it, what they call twatty in the industry. That's the way we've always done it. And that's what's happening here. the wireless industry and Delmarva Power, who is controlled by the Public Utility Commission, and these providers are not. They're just doing what they've always done because it's convenient and easier for them. And it's cheaper in many cases, but that is not a requirement under the federal code. And that's what's crucial here, and I failed to get that point across. Why would you want 100 to 700 of these installed throughout the city when you could have this and actually have it integrated into the other switch box that's on the pole? That's what, and I must admit it's personal, has been driving me crazy through this whole process. Verizon and AT&T are only interested in doing what they want to do and doing what they can get away with. Our code, and I'll say it again, is the new one, is exceedingly liberal. Exceedingly liberal. And it's going to become more liberal as it goes forward because the technology basically is making things smaller. And the antennas, but it depends on the frequencies you use and a whole bunch of other issues. But that's the problem I'm having with this. It has nothing to do with whether a city manager can say yes or no. I think that's a valid ability of the city manager. And if it gets to be too dicey, as has happened in the past, whoever the city manager is, they bring it to your attention and say, whoa, this is getting difficult. So I think it has to be treated as two separate issues. I agree with the first one, but I did want to make the point with regard to, and when I get to see the letter from Verizon, I'll make a comment on that, is that the new code is extremely liberal, and I think it is a serious mistake. That's my opinion, based on my understanding of the facts and science in this field, to not include best available technology economically achievable. That doesn't prevent them from doing anything, but it gives you the prerogative to take advantage of technology as it exists, as opposed to 100-year-old technology. This, by the way, also is 15-year-old technology. The newer version even is smaller and costs even less and is more efficient. So those are the kind of things you want to do for the benefit of the city.
Thank you.
I'm done.
Thank you, Mike. I respect your opinion. I happen to not agree with it, as you know, because I've supported the language that we came up with. It was a substitute, and I believe that can help to accomplish pretty much the same thing. With that, is there any further discussion by commissioners on anything?
I just want to say I appreciate, Mr. Strange, your comments, and the illustration I think was very helpful. I think as we've gone throughout this process, it's been difficult to understand some of that. However, I don't think that has much reference in what we're looking at today. Where I think things like that should be considered in the future is describing in more detail what is stealth technology or other design features where things cannot exceed certain inches or feet. But I'm not sure that plays a part in what we're discussing today. But again, I think as we evaluate the design manual going forward, those are the things that we need to consider adding.
Thank you, Commissioner. Walter, do you have anything to say? You're the only member of the public out there. No comment from you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Strange. Commissioner Sharp?
Well, Mr. Strange's level of perseverance brings me to ask one final question for me, and that is, what was it that we felt would prevent us from just using that language best available, if indeed it gives us any additional piece of maximum leverage? Is there something in using that term that is a detriment, is really what I'm trying to ask?
Well, maybe y'all can contribute, but we don't have anybody that can help implement that. Even CTC said it's brand new and it's new to them. Even Mike Strange in his comments has indicated that this has never been used nationwide. And so I infer from that there's nobody that can help implement it. And that's why I believe that the alternative language that we came up with is sufficient. And if we find out that it's not, then we're going to change it, just, like this previous discussion. But I have faith in doing it. There was also discussion that to put Batia in could take another 6 months or a year or more to be able to get all the nuances with it. And I want this passed sooner than later. Within reason. We don't need to necessarily rush it, but we have certainly been talking about this how long? A year, and this is light years ahead of the Cohen Group's original wireless ordinance that we presented. So again, if it is not going to be perfect, I recognize that, but we need to get something in place because, while Verizon is just one vendor that has removed their permit applications, they have already submitted one that's being acted on Surf Avenue, and so who knows who's going to come next.
Well, I appreciate you saying y'all have been talking about it for a year because I haven't been, but even the length of time I've been talking about it brings me to an uneasiness that we don't have something passed at the moment. And if we, well, I guess it would be on all of us, and myself included, that if our position is we have to keep a really close eye on what's going on and what our language is in the design manual, et cetera, then that's on us to do that and keep a really close eye on this.
Well, I think that's applicable to everything. It's applicable to outside dining policy we just adopted. We're all going to keep an eye on it, and if we see a flaw, we're going to address it. And I think that applies to almost everything we've done. But again, my desire would be that we make a motion to adopt the change in 270-4 definitions. We make a motion to equally adopt the design manual edits, including a new Section 8 language, and adoption of the edits to the map.
Mayor, I'm happy to make motions.
What I'd like you to do then is you have them in front of you, make a motion to adopt the changes to 270-4 in front of us, dated March 9th, version 2. Adopt the design, the wireless communications facility design manual referenced in section 270-46.1.2 C1O relating to location, placement, construction, and maintenance of small wireless communications, if you have that in front of you. Glenn will read adoption of a new section 8 to replace what's in here. And then the motion would conclude with adoption of the presented edits to the map that were presented today. Okay.
Do you want to do them all individually? We probably should.
Probably best to take them individually in case there's...
Yeah, that'd be fine. That would be fine.
Mayor, I move to amend Chapter 270 of the Municipal Code of the City of Rehoboth Beach, amending 270-4 relating to definitions with the new language reading on lines 15 and 16, install a new wireless support structure where none exists and to attach wireless facilities on the new structure.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Ed Chernowski and a second by Commissioner Tim Bennett to add a new definition called new in the 270-4. Is there any further discussion? If not, we'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner Sharp?
Just remember to give a reason, since, I'm sorry, Mayor, because
is
it
a
is a
zoning.
zoning, just give reason. In this one, because it's just an added definition, it's enough to say that you think this further clarifies the wireless regulations within the zoning code.
Commissioner Sharp?
Yes, I vote yes in the spirit of clarification.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Legree?
I vote yes, and the new definition of stealth technology is outstanding, in my opinion, as opposed to the Cohen definition.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Sharnowski?
I vote yes for the reasons stated by Commissioner Sharp.
Thank you. Commissioner Bennett?
I vote yes
For the same reasons.
for reasons stated by my fellow commissioners.
And the chair also votes yes for the reasons stated by the other commissioners. Thank you very much, and so that passes. Commissioner Sharnowski, would you recommend we do this?
Can I do the map first?
Yeah.
And then go into
Go ahead.
the other sections. Mayor, I move approval of the revised map related to small wire WCF zones dated 4/15/22, provided as an exhibit on the agenda.
Second?
Thank you. We have a motion by Commissioner Ed Sharnowski and a second by Commissioner Legree to adopt the changes presented to the map presented at this meeting. Is there any further discussion? If not, I'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner Legree?
I vote yes. The zones that were drawn by the zones are great. I think that substantiates a desire that we all have to have different zones and with different requirements.
All right.
Thank you, Mayor.
Very good. Again, the motion is to adopt the changes because the map is already presented to us. Commissioner Sharnowski?
I vote yes because it further clarifies, it provides further clarification.
Thank you. Commissioner Bennett?
I also vote yes for providing further clarification.
Commissioner Sharp?
I vote yes for the spirit of clarification and correction.
Thank you. And the chair votes yes for the same reasons as articulated by the other commissioners. It does clarify, and it was really filling in an omission, I think. So with that, that motion passes. Commissioner Sharnowski, do you want to?
What would you like to do?
Do you want to?
So yeah, I'd be happy to, Mayor. So to the extent you get a motion on this final one,
He's going to read this. I asked Glenn to read this only what the final language would be.
Yep.
so the edits to Section 8 of the Wireless Design Manual would read in full, and there's two subsections to it. It would say first, number one, the city manager or designee, open parens, S, close parens, shall reasonably determine whether a proposed small WCF design complies with the requirements of this design manual. Subsection 2 would say, any requests for a deviation from the requirements of this design manual shall be considered on a case-by-case basis by the city manager and shall be approved upon a determination by the city manager that such deviation is the least deviation necessary to comply with the objectives of this manual, Chapter 270 of the City Code, or necessary to avoid the effective prohibition of wireless service pursuant to the rules of the Federal Communications Commission, period. And there would be no subsection 3.
So I would entertain a motion to adopt that newly read Section 8.
Just a question.
Yeah.
Did you read the new subsection 1?
I did.
Okay.
City manager or designee shall reasonably determine whether a proposed small WCF design complies with the requirements of this design manual.
Okay. Mayor, I move approval for the changes read by the city solicitor to section 270, 46-1, C10 of the municipal code, section 8.
Do I have a second?
Second?
We have a motion by Commissioner Ed Sharnowski and a second by Commissioner Tim Bennett to adopt a new Section 8 as read and presented to us by Glenn. Is there any additional discussion? If not, I'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner Sharnowski?
I vote yes because the changes give further authority to the city manager and provides more discretion for the city.
Thank you. Commissioner Bennett?
I vote yes for the reasons expressed by Commissioner Sharnowski.
Thank you. Commissioner Sharp?
I vote yes because it defines the approval process with the least deviation.
Commissioner Legree?
I vote yes because it gets this system on the road. And I'm going to repeat Commissioner Sharp's comments, to be reviewed and improved over time.
Thank you, Commissioner. And then the chair votes yes for the other reasons already stated, and the motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. With that, left is to consider approval of the design manual in entirety with the incorporating the changes of the newly adopted map and the newly adopted Section 8. Commissioner?
Sure. Mayor, I move approval for Exhibit 1, which is the Small Wireless Communications Facility Design Manual, as has been amended in this meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
So we have a motion by Commissioner Ed Chernowski and a second by Commissioner Jay Legree to adopt the Facility Design Manual referenced in Section 270-46.1.2 C10 relating to the location, placement, construction, and maintenance of small wireless communication facilities, and including incorporation of the newly adopted map and incorporation of the newly adopted Section 8. Does that sound right? Is there any further discussion? If not, we'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner Bennett?
I vote yes based upon a discussed changes to the design manual here today.
Thank you. Commissioner Sharp?
I vote yes. This manual will give the city a good start.
Thank you. Commissioner Legree?
I vote yes because we need to get this published ASAP, and this is a great first step.
Commissioner Chernowski?
I vote yes because this manual will give the city a stronger ability to be restrictive and protect our city for future development of these wireless devices.
Thank you. And the chair votes yes, also for the reasons already stated by my colleagues, and that motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. And with that, we'll take a very brief pause to clean up papers and go to the next item. Thank you, Mike. Let's see, and with that, we go to our first item of old business, which is consider amending Chapter 92, Automobiles, Vehicles, and Traffic by amending specifically Section 92-264E1 relating to special considerations and exceptions specific to fees for parking at Deauville Beach based on vehicle length and day of the week. This is brought forward by Assistant City Manager Evan Miller. If you recall, we talked about this before at the last meeting. And we have a support document in front of us. Evan?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, so this was before you all during the April 4th workshop meeting. Again, it is an ordinance to amend Chapter 92, Section 264 regarding special considerations and exceptions. You'll recall that there currently is a tiered rate structure down at Deauville Beach, which is dependent on the length of the vehicle that is parking there. So the recommendation at the last meeting was to institute a flat daily parking fee for anyone that is over 22 feet 3 inches in length or longer, or which is 8 feet 1 inch in width or wider, of $50 per day.
All right, again, we talked about this at the last meeting. Is there any further discussion among the commissioners? How about the members of the public? Mike, Walter Brittingham? Nope, shaking their heads no. With that, I will entertain a motion to adopt this ordinance.
I move we adopt the ordinance to amend Chapter 92 Municipal Code of the City of Rehoboth Beach by amending Section 92-264E1 relating to special considerations and exceptions.
Second.
Very good. We have a motion by Commissioner Jay Legree and a second by Commissioner Tony Sharp to adopt what is version 2 in front of us, ordinance to amend 92-264E1 relating to special considerations and exceptions. Is there any further discussion by the commissioners? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, and the motion is carried unanimously. Evan, thank you for your work on that and bringing it to us.
Mayor, could I ask a question?
Yes.
Related to these changes, I thought there were other changes that we considered at the same time when it was last discussed. Can we just have an update on where that stands and why they weren't included in this?
I don't recall the suggested changes.
I believe it was related to the unattended vehicle section of this section of the code.
I think there were several that were discussed, and the determination was this was most important and most eminent for right now.
Okay.
So that was why we postponed the others.
Okay.
We needed to get this on and off our plate
Right.
so that
Understood.
it could be implemented for this summer. And the others, we still have a list going on.
We have a list.
Other parking
They're coming
things.
back.
That was,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
With that, thank you. We'll go to the next item, which is new business. And this is consider and possibly vote on modifying the interim city manager's compensation due to increased responsibilities. This item may include an executive session for the purpose of discussing personnel matters in which the names, competency, and abilities of individual employees are discussed as permitted by Freedom of Information Act 29 Del C, Section 10,004B9. I assume if you want to go into executive session, now's the time to make a motion to do so. Otherwise, we talk in front of the public.
Can we do this in front of the public? Was it, or are we going to be talking about things that are confidential?
Does the mayor have a preference?
Yes, does the mayor have a preference?
Yeah, I think we should go into executive session. Now, we will understand, though, that in executive session, as I give my disclaimer every time, we will be talking among ourselves. We will not be making any decisions or coming to any consensus. Instead, we will be coming back out into public session, and I do expect a vote in public session on this topic at that time.
Mayor, I move to enter into executive session for the purpose of discussing personnel matters in which the names, competencies, tongue-tied, sorry, and abilities for individual employees are discussed as permitted by 29 Del C 10004B9.
Second.
So we have a motion by Commissioner Ed Chernowski and a second by Commissioner Tony Sharp to go into executive session for the reasons noted. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
What?
When you first post the agenda, and I guess you may or may not be able to modify the rules when you want, but this was amended on the 14th. 14th is Thursday. Thursday is a deadline for the Cape Gazette. The public, in theory, and in reality, in my opinion, unless you send something out on one of your publications, there's nothing about this conversation being held today unless they went for an updated agenda coming off the city of Rehoboth. Because it's updated on the 14th, which is Thursday. You have a very nice young man you're going to talk about here today, and that's not the situation. It's the process by which you do it. And I absolutely respect Ann for what she does. I don't know how she gets it all done.
All right, thank you very much. With that, where was I calling?
We did the call.
No, we did the vote. We agreed to the vote. I just wanted to reinforce that we're going into in the caucus room for executive session where the public's excluded. I have no idea what the duration of that meeting will be. Again, there will be no actions or consensus reached in that room. We will come back in here to public session. And at that point, I expect we will resume public discussion of this topic, including a vote on the topic.
But for the two members of the public that are present, do either of you want texts when they come back in? So I can text message you if you want to come see the vote, since you're here. If you'll.
No, we're going to
go
go
over
there.
But
The point is, we don't know whether we're going to be 15 minutes or an hour. Do you want to be called or texted so that you are alerted to come back into this room?
609. 609
Walter, you want-
519 8372.
236.
Thank you.
10. We'll text both of you a few minutes before we come back in. If you could be within 3 or 4 minutes of here, we'd appreciate it. Thank you. Who has an agenda? I'm sorry. All right. Are we ready? I'd like to take a motion from the commissioners to go back into public session.
I move we go back into, exit executive session, Mayor.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Ed Stronowski and a second by Commissioner Tim Bennett to exit executive session and go back into public session. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, and the motion is carried. We are now back in public session. As the language in the agenda mentions, we will be considering and possibly voting on modifying the interim city manager's compensation due to increased responsibilities. The city charter allows the mayor and commissioners to set compensation for the interim or acting city manager. As you know, the mayor and commissioners have appointed Evan Miller, current assistant city manager, to take over the role of interim city manager. And so this discussion we're about to enter into has to do with the extra compensation for the interim city manager going forward. Open it for discussion or a motion.
Mayor, I move that we set an additional amount, salary for the interim city manager, set an amount of $3,000 per month, effective 4/18/22, to continue until 4 weeks after the start date of a new city manager.
Second.
And that
Oh, we
compensation is to
already
be
have a
prorated, right?
What's
I'm
that?
sorry. I just want to make sure that that compensation is to be prorated, so if you end in mid-month or whatever. it's
Sure,
prorated.
it would be, prorated as need be.
And we have we have a motion by Commissioner Ed Stronowski and a second by Commissioner Sharp to set the compensation for the interim city manager at $3,000 a month, including any prorated amount as appropriate, with the start date April 18th and an ending date 4 weeks after the new city manager takes their seat. Is there any discussion? Anybody, public, want to say anything? Walter? Nope. Mike? Nope, you're good. Any commissioners have further conversation on this? I'd just like to say I'm going to vote for it. I think Evan is in the right seat to be taking over as interim city manager. He'll do a fantastic job. And I believe that the amount is appropriate, as it's a compromise between the acting, or a compromise between the assistant city manager's salary and the city manager's salary. Is there any further discussion? If not, I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? And the motion's carried unanimously. With that, we go into the next item of business, which is commissioner announcements and comments. I don't have any identified. Do you all? No?
Mayor, if I could add one thing I missed earlier. Related to Main Street, there is on May 16th, there will be a margarita crawl. So tickets are available online for that event as well. And for those that would prefer non-alcoholic margaritas, those are also available.
Very good. Thank you very much. With that, review future meeting dates. Our next meeting, I don't have my calendar here. Here it is. Our next commissioners meeting is May 9th, which is a 9 o'clock workshop meeting, and then May 10th is a special meeting, tree meeting number 6. And just want to remind everybody that as far as I know, this is the last public meeting of the mayor and commissioners that city manager will be attending. So thank you, we're going to miss you.
Thank you.
Congratulations to
Thank you.
And with that, if there's no further comment, this meeting is adjourned at 12:04 PM. Thank you very much. Thank you.